Now, I think most of us can agree that being a person can suck ass. We've done some terrible things to our own species. Think of, I don't know, slavery. One of the most brutal and violent practices that was a standard for centuries. Think of things like the brazen bull, or the brazen bull, I don't know which way to pronounce it, I've heard it both ways, which just, to me, it sounds like the most painful torture method that has ever existed. I mean, there was a metal hollow bull, a giant metal hollow bull, that they lit a fire under, and then placed a prisoner in there, and cooked them alive inside this metal bull. Now this process could be anywhere between 10 minutes to an hour, and it sounds like absolute hell. And in nature, it's a brutal world. They're stealing, killing, deceiving, all sorts of things. Animals eating other animals. I mean, it's super violent and it's chaotic. But when we think of most prey-predator relationships, insects don't usually come to mind. But I want to show you why I think the insect world has it the worst when it comes to the absolute brutal things that can happen to them. And I'm just going to tell you right now, a lot of these are revolving around ants. So yeah, now I'm going to be listing these things in order that I think they're the worst, and there are going to be 5. Now, number 5 is ant slavery. Now, ants do make slaves. There are some species that do kind of make a version of slaves. I don't know if you can really call them that. You'll see why that is in a minute. How do they do it? Well, it all starts when a colony of ants discovers this practice, and a scout finds another colony that they can raid. Now this scout goes back to its colony and gets all the other ants riled up with pheromones and chemicals. After that, they march back to the other ant colony in a line that can be up to 10 meters in length. And once they get there, they start raiding. Now, the colony that is being attacked usually outnumbers the raiding colony by a large number, but that doesn't matter because the raiding colony doesn't want to kill all of them. They want to take their larvae and pupae. So what they do is they start a bit of chemical warfare. They release pheromones and chemicals that get the other members, the other colony's members, panicked and confused. So they can't organize, they don't really know what's going on. And this way, they can just go past them and get the larvae. Now, they take the larvae back and raise them as their own. Put chemicals in them that make them think that they are part of their colony, not the colony that they stole them from. And they essentially work for them unconditionally, without any expectations. And many colonies have become so dependent on this practice that they have completely lost their ability to care for themselves. Now, they can't feed themselves, they can't build their own hives. All they know how to do is attack, attack, attack. The slaves do the rest. And in many of these colonies, the slaves outnumber the other ants many-fold, like 1 to 10 a lot of the times, or maybe even more. So, I mean, it's absolutely insane. Now, I don't know if this is really slavery. It's more like, I don't know, maybe it's more like a cult vibe where, you know, you're really being put into, or being convinced to do something horrible that doesn't really benefit you, because the ants don't really have a sense of freedom. I mean, the slave ants don't really want freedom. They don't really mind working unconditionally because that's all they know. So, yeah, but I don't know if that really makes it any better. It just makes it less painful for the slave ants, but it really sounds horrible. So, yeah, that is number 5, and this is only the beginning. It is gonna get so much worse. Number 1, I think, just sounds horrible. So, stick around for that. Now, this one revolves around a certain species of ants, the army ants that live in New World rainforests. Now, these guys are famous for their relentlessness and brutality. They can take down prey that is a million times larger than them. There have been cases of horses that tripped and broke their feet that have been decimated by these small ants, these hordes of ants. They swarm over a prey animal and just decimate them. Now, how I like to think about them is they are essentially what Hollywood thinks piranhas are. I mean, we've seen a bunch of animated movies where piranhas have been, have eaten like giant animals in minutes. Now that is army ants in real life. So, I mean, it's absolutely brutal. I mean, these little guys can decimate anything. There hasn't really been a recorded case of them eating a person, but it is most certainly possible. And that just sounds like a horrible way to go. Just these small little ants all over you, biting at you all at once, and eventually they've taken so much of your flesh that you get the sweet release of death. So yeah, army ants, friggin' terrible. Now, this is another really violent one. Now, if you've seen a certain Tier Zoo video, you know that the final form of the antlion is low-tier trash. But the larva is one of the most efficient and scary predators in the entire animal kingdom. Now, what they do is they dig a little hole in the sand, and this is essentially a trap for an ant or some other small insect that wanders into this hole. Now, once they do, they will try to escape, but the antlion is buried under the hole, so it senses if something is dropped in. And when it does, it comes out and flicks sand at it so that it doesn't escape. And once it gets its jaws on its prey, then it releases a venom that liquefies the prey's insides. And then it sucks the insides out. That just sounds terrible. Liquefying your insides and sucking them out like that. A bit of organ juice. Come on, man, that sounds freaking disgusting. Now, these last two are really the ones that are just brutal and violent. I mean, number 2 is the tarantula hawk and the tarantula's relationship. Now, the tarantula hawk is famous because it has one of the most painful stings in the insect world. I'm sure that many of you have seen Brave Wilderness get stung by one of these. It is brutal. But that is not the only reason why they are famous. Now, there's a reason that they are called a tarantula hawk, and that is because the female tarantula hawk finds a tarantula and starts a fight with it. Now, this fight is usually won by the tarantula hawk because of its venom, and this venom, which is very painful to humans, it doesn't do what it does to tarantulas. It paralyzes the tarantula. And once this happens, the female tarantula hawk lays its egg on the tarantula. And then it drags the tarantula into an already made burrow where it will lay until the egg hatches. Now the reason that they don't kill the tarantula, only paralyze it, is so that the meat is fresh, because the tarantula will be the very first meal of the tarantula hawk larva. So as soon as it hatches, it just starts feeding on this poor paralyzed spider. Now this really shows how violent and brutal this practice is, because it can make me feel sympathy for this. I mean, it just sounds horrible, but it's still not as bad as number one. In the New World rainforests, there is a species of fungus known as cordyceps. Now, this fungus is famous for one and only one thing: mind-controlling ants. We're not really sure how the fungus gets into the ants, but what we do know is that it does not control the brain directly. It instead controls the nervous system and the muscles. So the ant still has its brain, but it cannot control its body, which just sounds like hell. That sounds like torture. Still having your mind, but not being able to control your body. Something else is controlling it. And this fungus forces the ant to crawl to a more humid climate. The ant latches onto a plant. Once it finds a more humid climate, if the fungus forces the ant to latch onto a plant, and the fungus slowly starts to grow out of the ant. And it only does this so it can disperse its spores more diversely and in a larger area. And now what's really interesting is that ants have something called social immunity, which means that if a fellow ant gets sick, they can sense that and they throw him out of the colony so that they don't get the other members of the colony sick. Now this does not work with this fungus. The other ants cannot sense when their fellow ants are being possessed by this fungi. Now this is really, really interesting. And this fungi is a built-in part of the ecosystem to keep the ant populations in check, because they do not infect too many members of a colony at once, only a few members at a time. Now, these fungi are built in to control these ants' populations so they don't overpopulate. But, I mean, nature is just getting too creative. I mean, mind-controlling ants against their own will, forcing them to leave their colony and then slowly growing out of them. I mean, that just sounds horrible.